So we are about, I would say, a half a kilometer out into the fine beaches area of White Rock, and we are about to podcast about one of the greatest Canadian icons, I guess number two on the list, or number two on the list of all time, I guess, when a few years ago, but number one to me as far as important Canadians in the world, Mr. Terry Fox. So this is an important conversation because we're coming up to the Terry Fox run, obviously Terry Fox Day, everything that's kind of happened around Terry's Marathon of Hope has gone global. And my guest this week, Bill, played an integral role in that. And I thought it was extremely important to get you on to talk about your journey, your time with Terry. There's a brand new book out called Forever Terry that is a really great read, and so there's just lots to touch on. So I really appreciate you coming to the beach on a beautiful sunny day.
I'm glad to talk about Terry, and yeah, you're right, this year is a challenge. It's the 40th anniversary, and the runs had to go viral now, and we're trying to get people to just step out their front door and go for a walk instead of the big runs that we have every year. So we're really counting on people to step up for Terry this year too.
That's great. I think you're going to see a very unique style of Terry Fox run this year. In fact, because everyone's going so viral and everyone is out doing it so much and finding new ways to get creative, that's bands, people, artists, that I think in this particular case you're going to find schools, you're going to find people very excited to find a way to get involved and get involved any way they can and very creatively.
I hope so. I really do.
Yeah. So, Bill, for our listeners, can you let's kind of take it back to the beginning for a minute about how this came about with Terry for you, because you've got a storied history. So there's movies, there's all this other stuff that we'll get to, but the core of this whole thing came together how for you?
Well, I had just moved to Toronto from small town Ontario to take a job with the Canadian Cancer Society as the Director of Fundraising and PR for the Ontario Division. And I had only been there about 3 months. I really actually at the time didn't even know what my real job was. And my boss came along and said, there's a kid with one leg going to run across cancer to raise money for cancer research. Do you want to go see what you can do for him? And that's basically how it started. Terry had already been on the road for about 2 weeks out of St. John's with him and his buddy Doug driving. It was just the two of them living in the van. And I watched them from afar for quite a while until they hit the mainland Sheet Harbor, Nova Scotia, which is where I very first spoke to him on the phone. You have to remember, back in those days, there was no cell phones.
Right.
It was a payphone he called me from.
When they assigned it to you, or when they asked you if you were interested in that side of it, does Terry have to approve you? Or
No.
is it just something like, hey, I've been assigned to you?
Yeah,
and
no,
we're gonna do this?
every province was supposed to have somebody to take care of them. Some of the provinces were more successful than others. St. John, or Newfoundland, for instance, was very good, but it's very sparsely populated. And when he got to Port aux Basques, just before he was going to leave the island, I think it was a population of 10,000, and they raised $10,000 for Terry. And that's where he initially got his idea for $1 from every Canadian. So as it was progressing and things weren't happening, I'm sitting back in Toronto and I'm reading the very small clippets in the newspaper. They're in the section 3 on page 6 type of thing. And over time, it started moving closer and closer to the to media. But the first time I spoke to him, he's in a payphone, and I said, when you come to Ontario, and I knew things were not working out there. The receptions were hit and miss, mostly miss.
Right.
People just didn't know about him. It wasn't they didn't care, they just didn't know about him. And so I spoke to him on the phone the first time I talked to him, and I said, when you come to Ontario, what do you want to do? And nonchalantly he says, well, I want to meet Bobby Orr, and I want to meet Daryl Sittler, and I want to go to a Blue Jays game, and I want to go to the CN Tower, and I want to meet Pierre Trudeau. And again, I've just moved from small town Ontario.
4 or 5 huge things.
I'm sleeping on my cousin's couch at the time in downtown Toronto. And I said, well, call me back tomorrow, same time, which was around 5 o'clock. And I came from, the worst anybody can do is say no. So I got on the phone with my assistant, a lady by the name of Deborah Kirk, and we started out contacting him. When he called the next day, I was able to say, okay, Sittler's on, the Blue Jays are on, the CN Tower is on, Orr's going to be in Europe, but he'll find us somewhere along the run, and I can't find Pierre. Pierre at the time was in Europe, and we eventually did meet with him, but Terry was sort of like, really? And I went, yeah, okay, yeah, it's then. So that's Sheet Harbor, Nova Scotia, and then I follow him from afar. And then we decided, the Cancer Society at that time was really run by volunteers. Right. Although I had an executive director, my real boss was a senior insurance executive out of London, a guy by the name of Ron Potter. And so they sent me down to New Brunswick to spend a couple of days with Terry to see what he was like. And that was the first time I spent any time with him in person, and I arrived in Edmundston, New Brunswick at about 3 o'clock in the morning.
When he does that East run, and it's minorly maybe deflating, like no one knows about him yet, then he gets to Ottawa and he has all these kind of requests. He wants to meet all these people. Are you getting pushback at that point, or by the time you started asking those questions, people were aware of what was going on? But like anything else, were people like, well, let's see how he does in Montreal? Like, it's kind of like this weird popularity contest where it's like, okay, well, everyone's on the Terry train, so we're all going to get on it. Or was there a lot of pushback, or was it a struggle?
Within the Cancer Society itself, there was pushback. Quebec, the eastern provinces did the best they could.
Yeah.
Nova Scotia, a gentleman traveled with him and was able to drum up some success. The executive director for Quebec division himself, and it is not the fault of the people, and I'm sure he did not know what it was going to become, but he made the decision not to get involved with the Quebec division because Terry didn't speak English. And
or French, yeah.
Or French, rather.
Yeah.
And that was just one man's decision, not knowing anything. That being said, so Terry's now been on the road for 2 months, and even Ontario division, not all areas, it was broken up into 7 areas. They were called district. Each one had a district director. So initially, Toronto area and Hamilton did not want to participate. And their reason being was our volunteers are spent. We've used them all up in April, and we don't have the manpower to do that. Of course, I've already been down to meet Terry. I see what the routine is, and I'm telling them, we don't need your volunteers. We don't need anybody. Then after that conversation and me visiting him in New Brunswick and getting to know him and realizing that first morning in my mind, there was absolutely no way that this kid was not going to do it. Right from the very beginning, from the very first day I met him, that very first morning, first off, I knew he was going to do it. I listened to him talk those first couple of days. I heard him speak to people. He spoke from the heart. There was no different sides to Terry Fox. What you see is what you got. No speech writers, no PR guys. I could suggest things to him. If it made sense to him, we would do them. If it didn't, you did not try and talk him into it. Meanwhile, in Ontario, I spent about 3 weeks driving back and forth, which answers your question a little bit, to all those little towns between Toronto and Ottawa, and Caladar and Marmora and Peterborough was probably the biggest ones. And I would drive into a little town of maybe 300 people, an intersection, and I'd go to the gas station and I'd say, who organizes things in town? And they go, go see Mabel. Right. She's the head of the right. The Women's Institute, or go Bob, he's in the Lions Club. Yeah. So I had a couple of Polaroid pictures, that's all. And I'd go up and I'd knock on their door or drove up to the business and show them the pictures, and I said, there's a kid running across Canada with one leg. He's raising money for cancer research. He still had not been making any news yet to any large extent. And the answer from all of them was, yep, we'll do something if he makes it this far. And I'd go, trust me, he's coming, and he's going to make it this far.
Yeah. It must have been amazing to see it for the first time for you. Like, you hear about him, you go and you meet him, but then to actually witness this marathon every day. It must have been mind-blowing to see.